Now look, Sacramento is a fun team to watch. They've been impressive, but the question still remains, do I think they're actually contenders? Can they actually make it deep in the playoffs? Well, at the start of the season, I talked about two teams, one of those teams being the Sacramento Kings. Earlier in the year, the Kings were sitting at around the 6th seed, and it surprised a lot of people because no one thought Sacramento was going to be this good. Every single person doubted the Kings, including myself, and I think even Sacramento fans weren't that confident. But yet, as time has gone on this season, I think we've all been proven wrong, and the Kings are actually here to stay. Another team I talked about earlier in the year was the Utah Jazz, and Utah for some reason was so good. In fact, I think they were the 1 seed at one point. And while it was fun seeing Utah dominate, currently they're at the 8th seed, which isn't bad because they were supposed to be tanking, but still. I don't know if this was on purpose or if they just aren't as good as we thought, but regardless, Utah is playing better than we thought. And so was Sacramento. See, Sacramento, around after 10 games, was supposed to be kind of a cute team, if that makes sense. Seeing Utah do good was kind of fun. It was exciting to see because no one saw it coming, but now we're getting back to reality. Sacramento, however, they're here to stay. In fact, they actually are a pretty good team that not a whole lot of people are talking about. Now, y'all are talking about the wrong LA teams. Now, the last time I talked about the Kings, I talked about a lot of good things, which I'm still going to focus and continue on, but they have one problem. But first, we need to look at why they're so dominant, and I think it has to be their offense. Of course, there are certain players that contribute to that, but their offense as a whole is amazing. Sacramento is somehow first when it comes to points scored per game. Oh, and their offensive rating is number 3 in the NBA, which I bet none of you saw that coming. Now, there has to be a reason why Sacramento's offense is doing so well compared to last year, and there is a couple factors. Technically, Domantas Sabonis was traded last year in the middle of the season, but now we're finally seeing what he can do on offense. Sabonis is interesting. He can play that Draymond Green point forward role, but I think he does it a lot better. But I think the biggest difference between Domantas Sabonis and Draymond Green is the fact that Sabonis brings spacing to the offense. But their spacing is actually pretty advanced when you look at it. They have the right positioning, they have the right personnel, and they have a guy like De'Aaron Fox who's able to make the defense constantly collapse on him when he's driving because Fox is a good driver. So because of that, there are multiple examples of De'Aaron Fox driving, the defense is collapsing on him, and Fox has his 1-2 choice. And with the Kings picking up a guy like Malik Monk who is a sharpshooter, it's definitely helping their 3-point shots. Now, going back to Sabonis, I find it interesting that he actually leads the NBA in rebounds and he's top 10 in assists. Sabonis is only averaging like 19 points per game, which is barely cracking the top 50, but I'm not too worried about his scoring because he's able to score when he can, but he's also really good at getting his teammates open and in position to score the ball. Now, as much as I'm going to praise Sabonis in this video, he's not a superstar, and not that anyone was ever calling him that, but I think it's interesting that the Kings don't have a superstar. I know people have like different definitions of what a superstar is. Some people think there's like 15, some people think there's like 5. While I think we're in an era of the NBA where there's a lot of talent, I'm definitely not calling Sabonis a superstar, but the Kings as a whole don't really have one. But most contenders, they do. The Nuggets, the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, even teams like the Celtics, Bucks, and Nets. Each of those teams have at least one superstar, some even have possibly 2. While don't get me wrong, De'Aaron Fox is making improvements in his game, and he's definitely going to be an all-star if he keeps playing the way he is, and Sabonis has showed improvements, and maybe he'll even be an all-star, but the unfortunate reality is that they're not superstars. And depending on who you ask, they might not even be all-stars. Some people might say that's a bad thing, which that is fair, but if I'm being honest, I think this helps the Kings a lot. Now, if you were to ask me, I would argue that De'Aaron Fox is the number 1 option. Some people would say Sabonis, maybe someone would say like Malik Monk for some reason, I don't know why. But if we're going off the basis that De'Aaron Fox is the number 1 option, well then most teams are going to have to game plan for that guy. So when you're game planning how to stop Fox, Fox doesn't even have to be the number 1 scorer in that game. The Kings have been very good at diversifying their points on who's being a scorer and who doesn't need to be, and all the other factors I brought up earlier, like the spacing that this team has. I'm not going to do a full segment like I did last time, but I think Mike Brown, him coming to this team, has definitely done a lot for the way this team has managed themselves. I've always been a very big fan of Mike Brown, and I think what he's able to do to these young players and the way he's trying to develop them is very telling of Mike Brown as a coach. And one of the reasons why I think Mike Brown is such a good coach is what he's able to do on defense, but but the unfortunate reality about the Kings is that their defense, well, it hasn't been that good. See, Sacramento is ranked 23rd in defensive rating in the NBA, but maybe there's some hope. I had confidence that over time, Mike Brown, if he worked with his team, that their defense would slowly improve because it's a new system, they gotta get used to it. And well, that prediction I made has sort of come to light, because in December, the Kings had a good enough defensive rating that in that month, the Kings had a defensive rating that would put them in the top 10. We're in January now, and it seems like the Kings are definitely making improvements to their defense, and they're trying to become better at that because that is their one flaw. But at the end of the day, Sacramento still has some things to improve on defense, and I wanted to figure out what was the issue. Because looking at their starting rotation of guys like De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis, they have a plus 8.5 net rating. And even if we want to break down every single player on that starting rotation, I'd argue each player in the starting lineup is a good defensive player. I'd say they're even a positive defensive player. Also, I know he's not starting, but Davion Mitchell, he's good on the bench and inside the rotation, but the problem is, well, the rotation. Aside from the starting lineup and Davion Mitchell, each time Mike Brown reaches deeper into the rotation and tries new defensive lineups, it seems like their defensive rating will slowly go down. But I'm not really that worried because, to be honest, Sacramento doesn't need a crazy defense. They're ranked 23rd, like I said. But if they could get to like the middle of the NBA, around the 15, and hell, if they can even get close to cracking the top 10, I'm telling you, this is going to be a scary team that teams are going to have to face, and they're not going to know what to do. Now, some people are still questioning whether or not the Kings can be very consistent when it comes to, winning. So let's look at it. The Kings are 4th in the Western Conference right now, and do we think by even the All-Star break, they'll still be a playoff team? Is this going to be a short-term thing? Are the Kings not even going to make the playoffs? Well, no, I think the Kings are making the playoffs. In fact, I think Sacramento is going to shock a lot of people. The fact of the matter is I could go on for hours about each player on this team and Mike Brown's coaching and how I love the offense. Hell, even for like 10 minutes of that, I could just yell light the beam constantly. This is a fun team, and I gotta be honest, I'm enjoying watching the Kings more than most teams this year. And listen, this isn't like years past. I don't know who's going to win the West. Western Conference is so damn wide open right now, I couldn't give you a definitive answer on who's going to win it. I've talked about a lot of the good things, and I even talked about the one negative in their defense, but if their defense, like I said, can get to a top 10 as far as rating goes, I think it's safe to say Sacramento will be a team I'm going to be talking about come July. Because the Kings have the ability to beat contenders. And sure, they have a lot of young guys, and some people might say they're not going to do well in the playoffs, but I'm very intrigued to see what's going to happen. Also, the Kings could make a move before the trade deadline. I'm not sure if they're going to, if they need to, but it could happen. The only thing I think they could really use is just some perimeter defenders to add to the rotation, maybe even some interior guys, but that's about it. They don't need to trade for some crazy superstar. They don't need to add to their spacing. If they can just get some great defensive players to add to the rotation, then yeah, Sacramento's going to be just fine. If you guys want to see a video on another contender in the Western Conference, click the video on the screen right here.